Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. The Tricky Triangle in the lovely mountains of Pocono Raceway. It's a track that has been polarizing over the years for the fans. But I gotta say, these last two events that we've had, very, very entertaining. The Tricky Triangle is known for three different corners that are different, combined from different racetracks. Turn 1, Trenton Speedway. Turn 2, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And Turn 3, the Milwaukee Mile. And this weekend we had a lot of strategy, a lot of mixed bags of strategy, track position being a key factor, and a driver celebrated a landmark win, but in controversial fashion. Let's get into all that went down at the Tricky Triangle yesterday. Number 1, Denny Hamlin, the all-time leadingest winner at Pocono, scored his 7th win at Pocono Raceway yesterday, and his second win of 2023, winning the highpoint.com 400, beating out Tyler Reddick, Martin Truex Jr., Kevin Harvick, and Ty Gibbs for the victory. This was also Denny Hamlin's 50th career win. Do you remember where Denny Hamlin got his first career win? It happened to be at this track in his rookie year in 2006, in a race where he had to overcome some early adversity, where he cut a rear tire, and he had to bounce back, and he battled back and got the victory. And a couple months later, he ended up winning the race. Actually, a month later, he ended up winning the race and swept both Pocono races and made the playoffs his first year as a rookie. This track has been very special to him. Winning at this track is for the first time ever. Winning it on a weekend after he lost his grandmother, it was a very emotional weekend and time for him. But winning the race meant much to him in a way to honor her. And he's been very good at this track over the past couple years. He would have won the race last year, but he got disqualified post-race for violating something with the NASCAR rulebook with the next-gen car, probably involving the front splitter. He got disqualified as well as his teammate Kyle Busch, and that gave Chase Elliott the victory. This time around, Hamlin was determined to make up for the disqualification last year, and they had a good race car the entire day. They were very strong, they were good at the beginning, they were good in the middle, and they were good at the end. They had one of the top 3 best cars at the very end of the race. When we had green flag pit stops in the final stage, Denny Hamlin's team gambled with 2 tires, something that a lot of teams decided to push for 4 tires, but he, along with Kyle Larson, they decided to roll with 2 tires. Then we had a caution come out with under 20 laps to go for a Chase Briscoe crash. Then we had a couple of restarts, and Hamlin was kind of stuck in the middle of some guys because he was on 2 tires versus some guys on 4 tires. But he got some good runs. It got involved in a little bit of a moment where he was racing hard with the 48 of Alex Bowman in turn 3. Hamlin's car got a little close to Bowman's back bumper, but never touched him. The air disturbed the 48 and sent Bowman around. If you remember what happened with both of them at the Chicago Street Course and Atlanta race, they've had quite a history this year, and of course they've had a history since that 2021 Martinsville race. But Hamlin was able to overcome that, and on the next restart, going into turn 1, the big moment of the race, which everyone's talking about, Denny Hamlin got into turn 1 after Kyle Larson got a little too high and started to drift up the track, and Hamlin made contact, a brief contact with the 5 car, knocking Larson into the wall and sending Larson a little bit backwards. And then we had another caution, so we had to go through another restart into basically overtime, even though I think we completed the scheduled distance, I think. At the end, Denny Hamlin was able to win the race under caution after Ryan Preece stalled off of turn 2 in the tunnel turn after a contact from Corey LaJoie, and NASCAR had to throw the yellow and declared Denny Hamlin the winner. He won the race, his second win of the season. Again, his 50th career win, which is hard to believe considering he's been around for 18 years in the sport. However, his win was not well received by the fans. Why? Because of what we're talking about, the Hamlin-Larson incident in turn 1. Denny Hamlin said, "I never touched him. I never made contact with him." Buddy, if you look at that photo, you touched him. You hit him. You saying you did not touch him is BS, in my opinion. He clearly touched him, and if you remember correctly, what happened last year with Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain at this race? The one that Hamlin thought he won until he got disqualified post-race? He made contact with Ross Chastain, sending him up the track. Chastain bounced on the outside wall and ricocheted in traffic, collecting Kevin Harvick and Christopher Bell. You and Chastain had, of course, your history last year, but you did the same thing last year to Chastain, the same time this time around to Kyle Larson. Larson was able to finish the race, albeit deeper in the field. But what you did yesterday is very similar to what you did to Ross Chastain last year. I know you guys had your history and everything, but you saying you didn't touch him, that photo right there says otherwise. You touched him. You made contact with him. It may have been slight contact, but you made contact with him. So don't say, "I never touched him," if you look at the pictures and everything. And here's the thing. Today, he's still standing by saying he didn't touch Larson. You touched him. So that's not a good look on you right there. Now, again, Denny Hamlin, put himself in the right position at the very end the end of the race yesterday to get the victory. But again, it was not well received by the fans, and they've been pretty declaring Denny Hamlin like the villain now instead of Kyle Busch. So that's hard to believe because many years ago, no one loved Kyle Busch. And there are people today that still don't like him, but I think he's gained much more respect aside from Denny Hamlin with some of the moves he's done in recent races in the past couple of years. So Hamlin's the victor, but unfortunately, he's one of the controversial talking points about what happened. And by the way, after that incident transpired under the yellow for whatever happened behind him, which was a crash for Justin Haley, Kyle Larson drove up on the front stretch after when we were under yellow and doored Denny Hamlin's side, showing his displeasure for him. He was not happy, and he had every right to be. But at the end of the day, Denny Hamlin's the winner, but in controversial fashion. Number 2, Kyle Larson, unhappy. On the receiving end, Larson was not happy with the way that Denny Hamlin raced him, even though they're good buddies off the track. They're probably not buddies on the racetrack anymore. I mean, Larson, first of all, he had an up and down day. Starting up at the front of the race, had a very strong car, perhaps the second best entry car to teammate William Byron. But on one of the restarts at the beginning of stage 2, which was, pretty much turn 1 Calamity Corner, Kyle Larson got bumped from behind by Christopher Bell and backed into the outside wall. Not too hard, though. It was just a tiny dent. All they had to do was bang some hammers on the left rear quarter panel, and he got himself back up there to the field, albeit through strategy. And he took a gamble by extending his stint in stage 2 to win that stage because of where they were in the race. He barely won that stage because he was low on fuel, but thankfully everybody came to pit road. He got his fuel and got his tires, and when we had green flag pit stops, Larson took 2 tires and put himself in the lead. And if we had gone green the rest of the way, I think Larson was going to be able to hold on for the victory, because as much as Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr., the two of them lined up together, were trying, they really couldn't do much with the 5 car with that clean air that he had. But at the end, of course, we had those restarts. Larson had a couple of good ones, and then that restart where the Hamlin got on the inside of him and made contact with him, sending him into the wall, pretty much ended Larson's race, because on the last restart, he just dropped like a rock after that contact he had with the wall, ultimately ending with a 20th place finish. And post-race, he was, not happy about it, because he felt like with what they had dealt with yesterday, they had a car capable of winning. But he's not happy with how Denny Hamlin raced him, and hearing that Hamlin never touched him, Larson said, he made contact with me. And the photos do show that Hamlin made contact with Larson, even though Hamlin's going to continue to deny. But Larson, he said, I'm good friends with Denny off the racetrack, but on the racetrack right now, things might change. He said, I might have to race people differently to gain the respect of some people. And the way Denny Hamlin has been racing people lately, not a good look. Not a good look. So Kyle Larson is going to probably have to try next time he's racing Denny Hamlin, race him differently, and maybe a little, shall we say, over the line. Not enough to hopefully get a suspension, but maybe drive a little more aggressive and teach Denny Hamlin, if you're going to do that to me, I'm going to do the same thing to you this weekend, but you probably will not like it, but it's how it goes. It's how racing goes. So Larson, despite all that stuff yesterday, he bounced back after early incident, but at the end of the day, probably cost himself that incident cost himself a chance at the victory. Number 3, MTJ P3, Martin Truex Jr. Strong run yesterday after the dominating win he had last weekend at Loudon. Truex was pretty much in the top 5 all day long in that Interstate Batteries Toyota. Had good speed, good long run speed, kept his track position all day long. It seemed like he had one of the top 5 cars, but it really wasn't so his race to win. He was just kind of mired within the top 5. Couldn't really seem to gain a run on guys when need to. But nonetheless, he still has had a very good run yesterday. And he's still, again, having a great resurgence year after missing the playoffs last year. When you win the opening, event at the Clash at the Coliseum, and then you win Dover, and then you win Sonoma, and then you win Loudon, you're having a career resurgence. You're doing everything right that you need to put yourself in position to have a shot at this championship. Now, last weekend I said that the rumors of Truex retiring probably is out of the question. He's still mulling that option, actually. He is not 100% sure about whether or not he wants to continue driving in 2024. I believe he will. That's just me. But it's Martin's decision. Obviously, he said he was going to buy a boat if he won last week in Loudon. He won Loudon, but he still hasn't bought that boat yet, even though many years, he's obviously, this time, he's still sponsored by Bass Pro Shops, and they support boats there. So, Truex, a really strong run yesterday. Felt like he could have had something for some of these guys, especially considering he was on a little more fresher tires than Larson and Hamlin when they took 2 and he took 4. But at the end of the day, all he has to settle for is a third place finish, which is still a good result for the man who won here in 2018. Number 4, turn 1, Chaos Corner. That turn 1 yesterday was a headache for a lot of guys. At the beginning of stage 2, back-to-back restarts. We get into turn 1, we have something go wrong. The first one started off when we had Joey Logano, who won stage 1 because he had good track position and some guys decided to pit. He pitted with the rest of the people that stayed out at the end of stage 1, and they had to come to pit road. And on that restart, going into turn 1, there was a little accordion effect, and Logano got turned by somebody and went into the outside wall, knocking him out of the race. The other car that was involved in that incident was Daniel Suarez. And if you all know, Suarez is currently in a battle to stay in the top 16 in points. At the end of the day, he was just 1 or 2 points below the cutoff line entering this race. He racked out hard yesterday, finishing dead last, and now finds himself at least 20-plus points below the cutoff. Still could point his way in the next 5 races, but it's almost going to take probably a win to get in. The win would be the easiest solution for Suarez to make the playoffs like he did last year winning at Sonoma, but I really haven't seen the speed from them lately. I know they had that second place at Atlanta, but really, have they had the speed to win recently? They have not. So they've got to figure it out, and they've got to get things going again. But unfortunately, yesterday, he was like the big loser when it came to the points battle with that wreck in turn 1 with the 22 car. Then the next incident that we had was Austin Dillon in the 3 car. He was running in the middle of the pack, and I think actually on the high side, he got a little bit out of the groove and backed into the wall. Not severely, though. He was able to continue on. I'll talk about him a little bit later, but he was the second one. Then the third one was, of course, Kyle Larson. He hit the wall, not severely, was able to get back there, and of course, the conversation and story of his race, you all know from watching point number 2 about this race that I talked about with Larson and his up and down day with overcoming that spin to get up there, have a shot to the win, but ultimately having that controversial moment late in the race with Denny Hamlin. But then later in the race, at the beginning of the final stage, or probably the end of stage 2, I think it was actually the final stage, Austin Dillon, once again, battling back after that incident, inside the top 10, top 15, goes 3 wide into turn 1 with Brad Keselowski on the outside and his former teammate Tyler Reddick behind him. Reddick, I don't know, I think he held his line, or the 3 car came down, I don't know which one, but they both made contact, and Austin Dillon went hard into the outside wall, knocking him out of the race for a guy that was having a good run yesterday. And he took his frustration out on the 45 car of Tyler Reddick's and tossed his helmet at the 45 car, but unfortunately that was just a bit outside. So Dillon wasn't happy, and he was pretty upset about the 45 getting to him. But when you look back at it, from my perspective, the 45 held his line. The 3 car, I think, came down a little too early because the 45 had a nose under there, and unfortunately it knocked the 3 car out of the race. And not really pleased, I think, still with his former teammate at RCR. But total chaos yesterday in turn 1. We had a few other incidents in turn 2 and turn 3 at times, but turn 1 was Calamity Corner yesterday at Pocono. And number 5, track position and strategy. That was one of the big talking points entering this race yesterday. How can you keep your track position by having a good race car, and can you use strategy to find your way up there? And what could possibly cost you track position and strategy? Pit road, restarts, a lot of that. Pocono, of course, is known for the big, restarts barreling off into turn 1 at 3 and 4 wide at times. And other than some of those chaos incidents at the beginning of stage 2 and turn 1, we had some fairly clean restarts yesterday at Pocono Raceway with them 3 and 4 wide, even coming off of turn 1 down Long Pond straightaway. And the strategy yesterday is see guys, sacrifice stage points to try to get that track position for the next stage and put themselves in a position to win versus guys that needed those stage points, particularly the guys on the bubble like Bubba Wallace, Michael McDowell, AJ Allmendinger, all those guys. They were fighting hard and seemed to be around each other for the majority of the race. And of course, guys that tried to fight their way from the rear of the field from where they started up towards the front, some were able to accomplish it, some were not so fortunate. For the most part, we had a couple guys that were mid-pack, like Ricky Stenhouse Jr., he got a top 10. Chase Elliott, after the spin in qualifying, started 35th. He ended up finishing 10th and had a pretty good race car for the most part. And there were other guys that were able to vault themselves up there through the mixed bag of strategies. Some drivers, again, took 2 tires. Some took 4 during the green pit stops. And I feel like that the racing at Pocono, with this next-gen car, what we saw last year and what we saw yesterday has made Pocono entertaining again. I mean, that's hard to believe because over the years, it's been kind of one of the snooze fests of the NASCAR schedule that people just don't want to go to. And plus, if you're sitting in those grandstands, you can't really see the entire racetrack. You pretty much need to bring binoculars if the security will let you into the racetrack. But I felt like yesterday we had a good, entertaining race, even with the controversial moment late in the race with the 5 and the 11. We still had a very fun race yesterday. And yesterday's crowd was so in it. It was a sellout crowd yesterday. The first time since 2013 in 10 years we've had a sold-out crowd at Pocono. I want to shout out to the fans yesterday for showing up and getting themselves a good race yesterday at Pocono with the strategy between guys wanting track position versus guys wanting stage points when it came to the end of those stages. It was very entertaining yesterday. I do feel like that Pocono has started to gain back a little bit of momentum as a very solid racetrack. I mean, again, the sights there with the beauty of it being in the Pocono Mountains, it's nice. We always have wanted the racing to try to get back and being back to some pretty interesting racing with, track position, strategy, and all that stuff. I felt like we got it. And even on long runs, we saw some battles yesterday, particularly when it came to those pit stops. But it was very entertaining yesterday for a Pocono race. I thought it was very, very entertaining in the Tricky Triangle yesterday. Now, we are off to the Commonwealth of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, shall we say, where, of course, tire management will be a big talking point, and, of course, having a good handling race car, especially on long runs, because we seem to have a lot of those in recent years, especially when we run it during the daytime. There'll be guys slipping and sliding all over the racetrack and wanting that track position and want to try to get the guy ahead that's probably not managing their tires to the best. Last year, Kevin Harvick got the win, and it was a must-win situation for him and got himself into the playoffs. Well, actually, it was the second race that he won. My apologies. He won the previous week at Michigan. So he would like to try to win the summer Richmond race this time around. But we had Kyle Larson in the spring win the race when he was probably one of the top 5 cars and benefited from some guys having some misfortunes, like Martin Truex Jr. being on old tires and Denny Hamlin continuing to shoot himself in the foot when it came to pit road and penalties. So what will transpire this upcoming weekend? Will we see pit road become a deciding factor? Tire management. Who will be the one on top next weekend in Richmond? We shall find out. It'll be a very entertaining one. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Subscribe, like, and congrats again to Denny Hamlin and the 11 team on their win yesterday at Pocono. Have a good week, everybody. Let's go racing.